Most dart players have no idea what average they actually need. Not the average they want, not the average they tell their mates after 3 good legs, the real average. The one that tells you where you actually sit. Pub League, Super League, County, Development Tour, Challenge Tour, Q School, and eventually the Pro Tour. Because a 50 average can make you dangerous in one room and completely invisible in another. So in this video, I'm going to break down what 3-dart average you realistically need at every level of darts. But more importantly, I'm going to show you what that number actually means. Because your average is not just a score, it is a map. And if you read it properly, it tells you exactly where your game needs to go next. First, let's clear something up. Your 3-dart average is not your best visit. It is not the one leg where you hit a 140, a 100, then took out 61. Your average is the full picture. Every 26, every 41, every bounce out, every missed double, every panic dart at single one. All of it goes into the same pot. That is why darts averages are brutal. They do not care how good you looked for 30 seconds. They care how good you were for the whole leg. And that is why average is useful. Not because it tells you your worth as a player, it does not. But because it tells you what level your current game can survive at. And the key word is survive. Because there is a big difference between playing at a level once and actually competing there every week. Let's start with the casual home player. If you're averaging between 25 and 40, you're in the normal beginner zone. That might sound low, but it is not an insult. It usually means you're still learning 3 things. How to group darts, how to stay straight, and how to finish legs without getting trapped on doubles. At this level, the biggest problem is not that you cannot hit treble 20. The problem is that your bad darts are very expensive. You might throw a 60, then a 26, then a 7, then miss 12 darts at a double. That destroys your average. So if you're in this range, do not chase 180s. Chase boring improvement. Hit more big singles, stay in the 20, 19 and 18 beds, stop drifting into 5s and 1s, and learn 2 or 3 doubles you trust. Because the fastest way from a 35 average to a 45 average is not magic scoring. It is fewer disasters. That is the first upgrade. Not brilliance, less damage. Now we get to the Pub League. And this is where a lot of players get the wrong idea. You do not need to average 70 to start playing pub darts. You really do not. If you can average around 40 to 50, you can play in plenty of Pub League teams, especially lower divisions. Will you win every week? No. Will you get battered some nights? Absolutely. But can you compete? Yes. And this is important. A 45 average is not bad darts in a Pub League environment. It is playable darts. It means you are usually finishing legs somewhere around 33 to 38 darts. That is not elite, but it is enough to put pressure on other beginners, especially if you can hit doubles before the other player panics. At this level, the doubles matter more than your ego wants them to. A player averaging 45 who can finish cleanly can beat a player averaging 55 who misses 20 darts at a double. We have all seen it. One player is throwing steady tons, the other player is clinging on like a shopping bag in a storm. Then suddenly, double 8 goes in, leg gone. That is pub darts. So if your target is simply to join a team and hold your own, aim for a real average of 45. Not your practice app average on a good day. Your honest match average, under pressure, with noise, with someone breathing down your neck, and probably with a dodgy hockey mat that moves every time someone walks past. Once you get into the 50 to 60 range, you are no longer just turning up. You are becoming useful. This is the level where captains start trusting you. You can win matches, You can play pairs. You can go on later in the night without everyone pretending not to look worried. A 50 average usually means you are finishing legs around 30 darts. A 60 average means you're closer to 25 darts. That is a massive difference. At this level, your scoring is becoming steadier. You are hitting more 60s, more 80s, more tons, and fewer horror visits. But here is the real sign. Your bad leg is not a complete collapse anymore. That is what changes. Beginners have good legs and disaster legs. Solid pub players have good legs and slightly annoying legs. That is progress. If you want to move through this level, your main focus should be consistency. Not maximums, consistency. You need fewer visits under 40. You need cleaner setup shots. You need to stop leaving awkward finishes by accident. Because once you average around 55, the game starts becoming less about hitting big scores and more about controlling the leg. Can you leave 40 instead of 43? Can you leave 32 instead of 37? Can you hit a big single under pressure? That is where pub league matches are won. Not on Instagram darts, on sensible darts. Now we are entering strong local player territory. If you genuinely average between 60 and 70 in matches, you are better than most casual pub players. Not all, but most. This is usually the level where people start saying things like, "He can play, she does not miss much. You do not want them in the draw." And that is because a 65 average means you're regularly threatening legs in the low 20s. You're not just hoping the other player makes mistakes. You are forcing them to play. That is a different thing. At this level, a few bad visits can still happen, but they are not constant. Your scoring has a base. Your throw repeats, your rhythm holds up better, and your finishing is becoming more intentional. You know your routes. You know your favourite doubles. You know when to switch. But this is also the danger zone, because this is where players often get obsessed with becoming a big scorer. They start chasing treble 20 every visit, even when it is not working. They ignore 19s. They ignore cover shots. They ignore setup play. And their average gets stuck. To go from 60 to 70, you need more than power scoring. You need intelligent scoring. If the first dart blocks the bed, move. If 20s are not working, switch. If you are on 265, think about the leave. At this level, your brain has to join your arm. That is when you start becoming properly dangerous. Now we get into the serious amateur zone. If you are averaging 70 to 80 in proper match conditions, you are getting into strong Super League county conversation and high-level local competition. This is where the room changes, because now missed doubles get punished quickly. Loose visits get punished quickly. Bad decisions get punished quickly. A 75 average usually means you are playing around 20 dart legs. That is not professional standard, but it is strong darts. Very strong darts. At this level, the difference between winning and losing is often not your best scoring. It is your worst 3 visits. 126 at the wrong time, one missed big number on a setup, one poor dart at double that leaves you nowhere. That can be the leg. This is where players need to train differently. You cannot just throw a treble 20 for an hour and call it practice. You need match drills. You need finishing drills. You need pressure scoring. You need to practice 121, 81, 61, 41, and 32 until they feel normal. Because the players above you are not just better at scoring, they are better at closing the door. And if you want to play at this level, you need to learn how to close yours. Now we are entering the level where the game stops being friendly. An 80 to 90 average is serious darts. This is the world of strong county players, development tour players, challenge tour players, and players who are starting to think about Q School. At this level, you are not hoping to win legs. You are expected to win legs. In this range, you are regularly throwing 15 to 18 dart legs. You are producing ton-plus visits often. You are finishing under pressure. And you are not falling apart because someone else hit a 180. That last part matters, because the higher you go, the less impressed you can be. If your opponent opens 140, you still have to throw your darts. You cannot start watching them. You cannot start rushing. You cannot start trying to become Luke Littler for 3 visits. You need your game to hold. That is what 80 plus really means. It means your throw survives pressure, not once, repeatedly. And if you are trying to reach this level, your practice has to become measurable. You need to know your first 9 average. You need to know your checkout percentage. You need to know how often you leave a finish after 12 darts. Because a general average tells you where you are, but the smaller numbers tells you why. Now let's talk about Q School. This is where a lot of people get a shock. Because yes, anyone old enough can enter. But entering Q School and being competitive at Q School are completely different things. If you want to have a realistic chance, you're generally looking at mid-80s to mid-90s as your competitive range. And even then, it depends on timing, because Q School is brutal. Short format, high pressure, loads of players, very little room to breathe. You might play a brilliant match and still lose. You might average 92 and get nothing. You might average 84, time your doubles perfectly and survive longer than expected. That is darts. But the broad truth is simple. If your average is in the 60s, Q School is probably an experience. If your average is in the 70s, it is a learning trip. If your average is in the mid-80s or above, now we can start talking. But even then, average alone is not enough. You need legs and bursts. You need to break throws. You need to take out 76 when it matters. You need to recover after a bad leg instantly. Because at Q School, the players who beat you might not look flashy. They might just keep going 100, 100, 140, 81, out. And suddenly, your dream is packing its little suitcase. Now we get to the Pro Tour. This is the deep water. And it is deeper than most people think. To exist on the Pro Tour, you need to be able to average around 90 regularly. To win matches consistently, you usually need to live in the 90s. To win events, beat top players, and survive deep into tournaments, you need the ability to go 100 plus. Not once, not in one magical leg, again and again. And here is the frightening part. A 95 average on the Pro Tour might be excellent, or it might not be enough. Because someone else can average 104 and send you home before lunch. That is the standard. The Pro Tour is not just good players. It is a room full of players who have already survived the levels below. Most of them can hit 180s. Most of them can take out ton-plus finishes. Most of them can play a 12-darter. The difference is how often they do it. That is the professional gap. Not whether you can play one amazing leg. Whether you can keep producing professional legs when your aim is tired, your head is cooked, and the other player has not missed a thing. That is why the Pro Tour is savage. No music, no walk-on, no crowd carrying you. Just board, opponent, table, pressure, and if your scoring drops for 2 legs, you're gone. So what average do you need? Here is the honest ladder. 25 to 40 is beginner and casual home player. 40 to 50 can get you into pub league. 50 to 60 makes you a solid pub player. 60 to 70 makes you strong locally. 70 to 80 puts you into serious amateur territory. 80 to 90 gets you near Development Tour, Challenge Tour and Q-School conversation. 85 to 95 gives you a realistic Q-School competitive range. And 90 to 100 plus is where professional darts lives. But do not use those numbers as a weapon against yourself. Use them as a compass. Because if you're averaging 42, your job is not to panic about needing 90. Your job is to reach 50. If you're averaging 52, your job is not to dream about the Pro Tour yet. Your job is to build a 60 average that survives under pressure. That is how improvement works. One level at a time. Not one fantasy jump. One honest step. So here is what I want you to do. For your next 10 practice legs, track your real average. No deleting bad legs, no starting again because the first visit was ugly, no pretending the double one nightmare did not happen. Track it honestly. Then ask one question. What level am I actually at? Not emotionally, mathematically. Because once you know that, your practice becomes much clearer. If you're under 45, work on big singles and simple doubles. If you're between 45 and 60, work on consistency and finishing. If you're between 60 and 75, work on setup shots and pressure scoring. If you're above 75, start tracking first 9 average, checkout percentage, and legs won under pressure. That is the path. Not guessing, not hoping, measuring. Because your 3-dart average is not there to embarrass you. It is there to guide you. And once you know where you are, you can start building the player you want to become. So let me know in the comments, what is your current honest match average? Not your best, your honest one. And what average are you trying to reach next?